I gave shelter to a wounded stranger in the snow. He called himself an angel, but spoke like a traveler between worlds. What Ariel revealed about Jesus, love, and why God seems silent will shatter everything you were taught to believe. This isn't religion. It's a frequency we forgot, a technology hidden in plain sight. Margaret's story will change how you see faith, humanity, and your own heart, but you must listen until the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that reveal hidden truths. Let's begin. The wind was brutal that night. Margaret Lewis stood in her kitchen, watching the snow pile up against the windows. Asheville, North Carolina, didn't usually get storms like this, but December 2019 had decided to be different. She was alone, like always, 51 years old, widowed for 5, a retired history teacher who'd spent the last half-decade trying to forget the world existed, and the world had been kind enough to forget her back. Her hands shook a little as she poured hot water over the tea bag. The kettle whistled. The wind howled. The house creaked like it was arguing with the storm. Jake, her old golden retriever, sat by the window, ears up, growling low in his throat. "What is it, boy?" Margaret asked, not really expecting an answer. Jake never growled at snow. She walked over, tea in hand, and looked out into the white chaos. Nothing but swirling flakes and darkness. The kind of night that made you feel small, forgotten. The kind of night where the mountains disappeared and you could convince yourself you were the last person on Earth. Margaret had felt that way for a long time now. 5 years since Tom died. 5 years since she'd felt like she mattered to anyone. She'd retired early after his death. Couldn't stand being around people anymore. Couldn't stand the pitying looks, the careful words, the way everyone tiptoed around her grief like it was something contagious. So she'd retreated here, to this little house on the edge of the hills, with Jake, with her books, with her silence. And she'd been angry at God ever since. Then the sky split open. A flash of blue light, sharp, electric, impossible, cut through the storm like a blade. It wasn't lightning. Margaret had seen plenty of lightning. This was different, concentrated, precise, like something aimed. It fell, behind the old barn, the one she never used anymore, the one that had been rotting quietly for years, full of hay bales and memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Margaret's heart kicked hard in her chest. "What the hell was that?" Jake barked. Once, twice, sharp and urgent. Then he bolted toward the door, claws scrabbling on the wooden floor. She stood there for a second, frozen. Part of her wanted to stay inside, lock the door, pretend she hadn't seen anything, turn on the TV, drink her tea, let whatever was out there be someone else's problem. But another part, the part that used to believe in things, before life taught her otherwise, couldn't ignore it. She grabbed her coat from the hook by the door, her flashlight from the drawer, pulled on her boots, still damp from shoveling earlier. "This is insane," she muttered to herself, but she went anyway. The cold hit her like a fist. Snow stung her face, tiny needles of ice. The wind tried to push her back toward the house, like it was warning her, like nature itself was saying, "Stay inside, don't look, don't get involved." Margaret pushed forward. Jake was already ahead, barking into the darkness. His golden fur was already covered in white. He looked back at her once, as if to say, "Hurry up." She trudged through the drifts, flashlight beam cutting weak paths through the storm. Her breath came out in clouds. Her fingers were numb inside her gloves. Snow got into her boots. The world was nothing but white and wind and cold. She reached the barn. The door was half open, swinging on rusty hinges, creaking. Inside there was a sound, metallic, strange, like something breathing that shouldn't be able to breathe, like machinery trying to imitate life. Margaret's hand tightened on the flashlight. "Hello?" she called out. Nothing. Just that sound, that strange rhythmic pulse. She stepped inside. The barn smelled like old hay and rot and something else. Something sharp, electric, like the air after lightning strikes. The beam of her flashlight swept across old wood, rusted tools hanging on nails, stacks of hay covered in dust and cobwebs, and then it landed on him. A figure, collapsed between the bales, glowing. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. The being's skin shimmered with silver tones, like moonlight trapped under flesh, like someone had taken starlight and shaped it into something almost human. His eyes, still half open, glowed faintly, pulsing with soft blue light. His body trembled, radiating that same eerie luminescence. Each breath sent ripples of light across his skin. He was beautiful, terrifying, impossible, and he was hurt. Margaret could see it. Dark patches on his body that looked like burns or wounds. Hard to tell. They glowed differently than the rest of him. Dimmer, flickering. She took a step forward. Her mind screamed at her to run. Call someone. Get help. Get away. But her legs wouldn't listen. She knelt beside him. His chest rose and fell, shallow, struggling. Each breath seemed to cost him something. Up close, she could feel the heat radiating off him. Not burning, but warm, like standing near a fireplace. Then his eyes opened fully, deep, endless, like looking into the space between stars. And she heard it, not out loud, not through her ears, inside her mind. Clear, calm, gentle. Do not be afraid, Margaret gasped. Her flashlight fell from her hand, rolling across the dirt floor, casting wild shadows. The voice came again. Please, do not be afraid. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands shook. I can hear you, she whispered. In my head, I can hear you. Yes, I am sorry. It is the only way I can speak. I mean you no harm. Margaret stared at him, at this impossible thing, this being who shouldn't exist. What are you? She breathed. The voice inside her mind was patient, soft, like someone speaking to a frightened animal. My name is Ariel. I need shelter. Margaret couldn't move, couldn't think straight. Her brain was trying to process what was happening, but it kept hitting walls. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be real. But it was. Ariel's eyes held hers. There was no threat in them, no malice, no aggression. Just pain, deep, obvious pain, and something else. Something that felt almost like hope, like he was trusting her with something precious just by being here. Margaret opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. You're talking inside my head. Yes, it is the only way I can communicate in this form. I am sorry if it frightens you. I know it is unusual for your kind. It does frighten me, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. It frightens me a lot. Ariel's expression softened. She could feel it even without him moving. I understand. But I mean you no harm, Margaret Lewis. I am hurt. I cannot go far. And the cold, it is draining what little strength I have left. I will die out here if I remain. Margaret looked at him, really looked. His body was humanoid but wrong in small ways. The proportions slightly off, the fingers a bit too long, the skin too smooth, too reflective, like polished metal. And those wounds, they glowed, like embers under translucent skin, pulsing faintly with each labored breath, some dark, some bright, like his body was fighting something inside. What are you? She asked again. Where did you come from? A traveler, from far away, farther than you can imagine, farther than your telescopes can see. You're from space. Yes. An alien. Yes, though I prefer traveler. Margaret felt dizzy. She sat back on her heels, pressing one hand against the cold dirt floor to steady herself. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen to retired history teachers in North Carolina, but here he was, real, solid, dying. She should have run, should have called someone, the police, the military, NASA, someone who knew what to do with glowing aliens in barns. But then Jake did something that changed everything. The dog is in barns. But then Jake did something that changed everything. The dog, who'd been barking and growling since they entered the barn, suddenly went quiet. He walked forward slowly, tail low, head tilted, cautious but curious. He sniffed Ariel's outstretched hand. Then he licked it, just once, gentle, the way he used to lick Tom's hand. And then Jake sat down beside the glowing stranger like he'd known him his whole life. Margaret stared. Jake didn't trust anyone anymore. He'd been Tom's dog first, and after Tom died, Jake became protective, suspicious, guarded. He barked at mail carriers and delivery drivers and neighbors who came too close to the house. He'd even snapped at Margaret's sister once. But here he was, calm, content, like he'd found something safe, like he'd found something good. Margaret exhaled slowly. Her hands stopped shaking. Okay, she said. Okay. She stood, legs shaky, and reached down. Can you stand? With help. She slipped her arm under his shoulder. He was heavier than he looked, but also warmer. Much warmer, like standing too close to a space heater. The heat radiated through his skin, if that's what it was, and into her coat. Together, they moved toward the barn door. The walk back to the house felt like miles. The snow fought them with every step. The wind screamed in their ears. Margaret's muscles burned. Her lungs ached from the cold, but she didn't let go. One foot in front of the other. That's all she had to do. Ariel leaned heavily against her. She could feel his weight increasing with every step, like his strength was leaving him. "Stay with me," she said out loud, not sure if he could hear her. "I am trying." They reached the porch, up the steps, through the door. Inside, the warmth hit them like a wall. Margaret kicked the door shut behind them with her boot and guided Ariel to the couch. He collapsed onto it with a sound that was almost human, almost a groan, but not quite. Margaret stood there for a moment, breathing hard, snow melting off her coat onto the floor. Then she moved. She grabbed blankets from the closet, towels from the bathroom, filled a basin with warm water from the kitchen sink. She didn't know what she was doing, didn't know if any of this would help. For all she knew, warm water could be poison to him, but she did it anyway, because that's what you do when someone's hurt, even if that someone isn't from this world. She knelt beside the couch and dabbed at one of the glowing wounds with a damp cloth. It was hot to the touch, not painfully so, but warm, alive. The light pulsed under her fingers. "I am a traveler." The voice came again, softer now, tired, "and an angel, in your terms." Margaret paused, cloth hovering over his skin. "An angel?" "Yes. From heaven, from beyond, from places your people have not yet named, from distances your minds have not yet conceived." She sat back on her heels, still holding the cloth. Water dripped onto the floor. Angels are supposed to have wings. She felt rather than heard his quiet amusement. "Some do, in some forms. In others we travel differently." Margaret looked at him, at this broken glowing thing on her couch, this impossible being who'd fallen from the sky into her life. "Then rest," she said quietly, voice rough. "Even angels bleed, I guess." Ariel's eyes closed slowly, like shutters coming down, and for the first time in hours, in years, maybe Margaret felt something she hadn't felt since before Tom died. Purpose. Someone needed her. Someone depended on her, even if that someone was a stranger from the stars. She covered him with another blanket, even though he didn't seem to need it. Then she sat in the armchair across from him and watched him breathe. The lights in the house started flickering, not like a power surge, not like the storm was affecting the lines. This was different, more like breathing. Every time Ariel inhaled, the bulbs dimmed slightly. Every exhale, they brightened again. A gentle pulse, rhythmic, steady. Margaret sat in the old armchair across from the couch, watching, waiting. She'd covered him with 2 blankets, but they didn't seem to matter. He generated his own heat. The air around him shimmered slightly, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. The room felt different now, thicker, denser, like the air itself had weight, like the space was holding its breath along with him. Margaret should have been terrified. There was a glowing stranger on her couch, a being who claimed to be an angel from another world. She should have been calling for help, locking herself in the bedroom, loading Tom's old hunting rifle just in case. But she wasn't. Instead, she felt calm, grounded, peaceful, like something inside her that had been screaming for 5 years had finally gone quiet. Ariel slept, his chest rising and falling in that strange, rhythmic pattern, his body wrapped in a soft blue glow that reminded her of the aurora borealis photos she used to show her students when teaching about the poles. Beautiful, otherworldly, sacred somehow. Jake lay at the foot of the couch, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed. His tail gave a lazy thump when Margaret looked at him, but he didn't move, didn't want to leave the angel's side. Margaret leaned back in her chair. The leather creaked under her weight. Tom's chair. She'd kept it all these years, even though sitting in it hurt, even though it reminded her of all the nights they'd sat here together, reading, talking, just being. Now she sat in it and looked at Ariel's face. So serene, so still, almost human, but not quite. The features were just a touch too perfect, too symmetrical, like someone had painted an ideal rather than growing naturally. And suddenly, without warning, she thought of Tom, her husband, dead 5 years now, cancer, pancreatic, The kind that takes everything slowly, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but pain and morphine and waiting. She'd prayed so hard during those final months, begged God to spare him, promised anything, everything, promised to be better, to believe harder, to go to church every Sunday, to volunteer, to dedicate her life to service. God hadn't answered, or at least, that's what she'd believed. Tom died on a Tuesday morning in spring, birds singing outside, flowers blooming, the world going on like nothing had happened, and Margaret's faith died with him. She felt the tears coming before she could stop them. Hot, bitter. Why? She whispered into the quiet room. Why did you take him? She wasn't talking to Ariel. She wasn't even sure who she was talking to anymore. The God she used to believe in, the universe, the empty air. Why did you leave me alone? Her voice broke on the last word. 5 years of grief and anger and loneliness came pouring out in that one syllable. Why didn't you answer? I prayed. I begged. I did everything right. And you just let him die. The tears came harder now. Margaret pressed her hands over her face, shoulders shaking. I needed him. I still need him. And you took him away. You took him and left me here with nothing. The room was silent except for her crying. And then, an answer. Not from her own thoughts. Not from memory, not from grief playing tricks, from somewhere else, gentle, warm, certain, filling the space around her like light filling a dark room. Love never dies, it only changes form. Margaret gasped. Her hands fell from her face. She looked around wildly. Who? You already know. The voice wasn't Ariel's. It was bigger, softer, older, like it came from the walls themselves, from the air, from everything and nothing. And she did know. Somehow, impossibly, she did. Tom? She breathed. Love never leaves. It transforms. It becomes other things. Memory, strength, courage, the ability to help a stranger in the snow. Margaret's breath came in short gasps. Her heart pounded. You carried me into your house tonight. The voice continued. You helped without knowing why, without needing proof or reward. That was love. That was me. Still here, still with you, just in different form. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed, not from sadness anymore, not from anger, from relief. For the first time since Tom died, she felt seen, heard, understood, like someone had finally answered the question she'd been screaming into the void for 5 years. The blue light from Ariel pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. The room seemed to breathe with it, in and out, steady, calm. Jake sighed in his sleep, content, and the night, which had been so dark and cold and terrifying just hours before, felt sacred now, holy in a way church had never felt. Margaret cried until there were no more tears left, until her chest ached and her eyes burned and her throat was raw. Then she wiped her face with shaking hands, took a deep, shuddering breath, and whispered into the blue-lit darkness, "Thank you." The room hummed softly in response, a sound she felt more than heard, like the house itself was saying, "You're welcome." Margaret sat there for a long time, watching Ariel sleep, watching Jake guard him, feeling the warmth and peace settle into her bones. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel alone. Morning came quietly. No dramatic sunrise, no sudden revelation, just pale winter light filtering through the windows, turning the snow outside into something that looked like diamonds. Margaret woke in the armchair, neck stiff, blanket half fallen to the floor. She blinked slowly, disoriented. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was, why her body ached. Then she remembered. Her eyes snapped to the couch. Ariel was awake, sitting up, looking around the room with quiet curiosity, like a child seeing something for the first time. The wounds on his body had dimmed, still faintly visible beneath his shimmering skin, but no longer glowing like embers. His color had improved tulip gray, more silver, more alive. He turned to look at her, and that voice, calm, clear, gentle, returned to her mind. "You saved me. Now you must listen." Margaret sat up slowly, running a hand through her messy hair. Her mouth was dry, her brain still foggy with sleep. She probably looked terrible. Hadn't showered, hadn't changed clothes, had spent the night in a chair watching an alien sleep. Do you want coffee?" she asked. "Because what else do you say to an angel from space in your living room at 7 in the morning?" Ariel's lips curved into something like a smile. the first real expression she'd seen on his face. "I do not consume as you do. I feed on light, energy. But thank you for the kindness." Margaret laughed. She couldn't help it. The absurdity of the moment offering coffee to a glowing being who ate sunlight, it just hit her all at once. The strangeness, the impossibility, the sheer ridiculousness of her life right now. And somehow that laughter broke the spell, made everything feel less supernatural, less terrifying, more human. She stood, stretching her sore back, and walked to the window. The storm had passed completely. The sky was clear and blue. The snow outside was pristine, untouched except for their tracks from last night, 2 sets of footprints leading from the barn to the house, proof that it had really happened. "Why did you come here?" she asked, not looking at him. Easier to ask hard questions when you're not making eye contact. Ariel was silent for a moment. She could feel him considering his words. Then, "Because you still believe that God has gone silent." Margaret froze. Her hand, reaching to pull back the curtain, stopped midair. Her chest tightened. Old anger flared. She turned to face him. "How do you—" "I know, because it is written all over you, in your energy, in your heart. In every breath you take, you carry it like a stone tied around your neck. The belief that you were abandoned." She wanted to argue, to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, that he didn't know her, didn't know anything about her life or her grief, but she couldn't, because he was right. "Then why?" she asked, voice shaking. "Why did you come here? To mock me? To tell me I'm right? That God really doesn't care?" "No." Ariel stood, slowly, carefully, like he was still testing his strength. He crossed the room, bare feet silent on the wooden floor. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. His eyes, those impossible, glowing eyes, shelled hers with such gentleness it made her throat tight. "I came to remind you that love is living energy, not a dead memory." Margaret's breath caught. "God has not abandoned you, Margaret Lewis. You have simply forgotten how to hear." She felt her knees weaken. She grabbed the back of the chair to steady herself. "But I prayed," she said, and her voice sounded small, broken, like a child's. "I begged him every day, every night. I asked him to save Tom, to heal him, to give us more time, and he didn't answer. Tom died anyway." He answered, every time. "No," he answered, "but you were listening for words, and God speaks in presence." Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes. Her vision blurred. Ariel took another step closer. His warmth enveloped her like sunlight. "The silence you feel is not God's absence. It is the sound of your own fear, your grief. It is so loud inside you that you cannot hear anything else. It drowns out everything." Margaret covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. "I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to let go. You already began. Last night." She looked up at him through tears. "What?" "When you chose compassion over fear. When you saw something impossible and frightening and chose to help anyway. When you brought me into your home, not knowing what I was, not knowing if I was dangerous. You acted from love, pure love. That was just— I couldn't leave you out there to die." "Exactly." Ariel's voice was so soft, so kind. It wrapped around her like a blanket. "Love is not belief, Margaret. It is not prayer. It is not words spoken into the dark. Love is action. Love is choosing to help. Choosing to open your door. Choosing to sit awake all night making sure a stranger keeps breathing." He reached out slowly and placed one long-fingered hand over her heart. The touch was warm but not burning, gentle. She could feel energy pulsing from his palm into her chest, like he was showing her something. "You did all of that without knowing who I was, without needing proof of divinity, without needing a reward or recognition. You simply loved. And that is God speaking. That is God acting. Through you." Margaret stood there, trembling, unable to speak. The tears kept coming. Jake patted over and rested his head against her leg. Warm, solid, real. Ariel continued, his words settling into her soul like seeds being planted. "The silence of God is only the sound of human fear. But when you love truly, selflessly love, you break that silence. You become the answer to your own prayers. You become the presence you've been seeking." Margaret closed her eyes. Let the words sink in. Let them find the broken places inside her and fill them with something warm and alive. "Tom's love never left you," Ariel said gently. "It transformed. It became your strength. your compassion, your ability to see a wounded stranger and choose kindness. That is love continuing. That is God speaking, always speaking. You just had to remember how to listen. Margaret opened her eyes, looked at this impossible being standing in her living room, this angel or alien or whatever he was. And for the first time in 5 years, she believed again, not in religion, not in churches or prayers or rules, but in love, in presence, in the quiet, persistent voice that says, keep going, keep helping, keep loving. She wiped her eyes, took a deep, shaky breath, and whispered, thank you. Ariel smiled, really smiled this time, and the room filled with gentle blue light. They talked for hours. Margaret made tea that went cold. The morning stretched into afternoon. The sunlight moved across the floor in slow, golden rectangles, and Ariel spoke, not out loud, never out loud, but his voice in her mind was clearer than any spoken words had ever been. He told her about his people, travelers, beings who moved between worlds the way humans moved between cities. They'd been doing it for longer than Earth had existed, longer than the sun had been burning. We watch, he said. We observe. We learn. Learn what? Margaret asked, sitting cross-legged on the floor now, tea forgotten on the side table. How different worlds discover love, how they understand it, how they express it. Margaret frowned. Love? That's what you study? Not technology or science or... Love is the technology, Ariel said simply. Everything else is just application. She didn't understand. Not yet, but she listened. He explained that his kind had visited Earth many times throughout human history, always watching, sometimes interacting, rarely interfering. We observed your species learning, growing, struggling with the concept that you are all connected, that what you do to one, you do to all. And, Margaret prompted, and you kept forgetting. Every few generations, you would remember, briefly, and then fear would return, and you would forget again. Margaret thought of all the wars she'd taught about, all the hatred, all the violence humans had inflicted on each other throughout history. So what changed? Jesus. The name hung in the air between them, heavy, loaded with 2,000 years of religion and rules and institutions. Margaret tensed. I'm not sure I want to hear this. You need to hear this. Ariel's voice was gentle but firm. She felt him choosing his words carefully. Jesus was sent to remind humanity of what it already knew, what it had forgotten, not to teach something new, to reawaken something ancient. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know why. The words touched something deep inside her, something that had been sleeping. He didn't come to found a religion, Ariel continued. He came to reactivate a frequency, a way of being, a way of seeing each other. What frequency? Love is a force, not an emotion, not a feeling, but an actual, tangible force that creates reality, that heals, that transforms, that connects all living things. Margaret wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The church never taught it that way. I know. Humans did what humans do. They took something living and made it into rules, took something free and built walls around it, took something universal and made it exclusive. She laughed bitterly. So religion ruined it. No, fear ruined it. Religion was just the tool fear used. Ariel shifted slightly, the blue light around him pulsing softly. Every gesture of compassion is an act of creation, he said. Not a sacrifice, not a duty, not something you do to earn favor with God. It is creation itself. You are literally creating more love in the world, adding to the frequency, raising the vibration. Margaret shook her head. That sounds like New Age nonsense. Does it? You brought me into your home last night. Did that feel like nonsense? Did that feel empty? Or did it feel like the most real thing you've done in years? She went quiet, because he was right. Helping him had felt more real, more meaningful, more alive than anything she'd done since Tom died. Why did we forget? She asked quietly. If this is so important, so fundamental, why did we forget? Ariel's response was immediate. Because fear is an ancient virus, and faith is the cure. Margaret looked up at him. Fear is a virus? Yes. It spreads. It mutates. It infects entire populations. It makes you forget who you are. Makes you see others as threats instead of reflections. Makes you hoard instead of share. Makes you hurt instead of heal. The blue light pulsed stronger now, in rhythm with his words. Fear tells you that you are separate, alone, that you must protect yourself, that resources are limited, that love is scarce, that God is far away and angry and keeping score. Margaret felt each word like a physical thing, like he was describing the exact shape of the weight she'd been carrying for 5 years. And faith? She whispered. What does faith do? Faith reminds you of the truth, that you are connected, that love is infinite, that God is not distant but woven through everything, that you are powerful, that your choices matter, that every act of kindness literally changes the structure of reality. He paused, and she felt his attention focus on her completely. Faith is not belief in something you cannot see. Faith is remembering what you've always known but been taught to forget. Margaret sat there, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't even sure why she was crying anymore. Grief, relief, recognition, maybe all of it. Jake padded over and put his head in her lap. She stroked his fur absently, letting Ariel's words settle into her bones. Jesus knew this, Ariel said softly. He tried to show your people. He healed the sick not through magic, but through activating the frequency. He fed the multitudes not through miracles, but through demonstrating that when you give from love, abundance appears. He forgave sins not because he had special authority, but because forgiveness is the frequency's natural state, and we killed him for it, Margaret said bitterly. No, you killed him because fear felt threatened, because the frequency true, unconditional love dissolves fear, and those in power, those who ruled through fear, could not allow that. Margaret looked at Ariel, really looked at him, this being from another world who spoke about Jesus like he'd known him personally. Were you there? She asked. 2,000 years ago. Were you watching? Ariel's expression shifted, something almost like sadness. Many of us were. We hoped that his message would take root, that humanity would remember. But we didn't. You did, briefly, in small pockets, in individuals who truly understood. But institutions rose up around him. Rules replaced relationship. Ritual replaced reality. And the frequency was buried under 2,000 years of fear, dressed as faith. Margaret felt anger rising. So it was all for nothing? He died for nothing? No. Ariel's voice was firm now, strong. He planted seeds. Seeds that are still growing, still spreading. You are one of those seeds, Margaret Lewis. Last night, when you helped me, that was the frequency. That was Jesus's message alive in you. That was love as creation. She sat with that. Let it sink in. Each phrase Ariel spoke felt like warmth spreading through her chest, like something frozen was finally thawing. The message never died, Ariel continued. It just got buried. And now it's time for it to return, for people to remember, not through religion, not through rules, but through action, through choice, through love expressed as tangible force. Margaret wiped her face, took a deep, shaky breath. Why are you telling me this? Ariel's eyes met hers. So much kindness there, so much patience. Because you asked, because you're ready to hear it, and because the world needs people who remember. The room was silent except for Jake's soft breathing and the gentle hum of energy that seemed to emanate from Ariel's presence. Margaret felt different, changed, like something inside her had been rewired. She didn't have all the answers, didn't understand everything he'd said, but she felt it, felt the truth of it vibrating in her chest. Love as frequency, as technology, as creative force. Jesus as reminder, not founder. As activator, not ruler. Faith as remembering, not believing. It made more sense than anything she'd heard in church ever had. That afternoon, everything changed. Margaret was in the kitchen making soup, actual soup this time, not just tea, when she heard Jake whimper. It wasn't his normal sound. This was pain. She dropped the wooden spoon and ran into the living room. Jake was on the floor, body trembling. His legs were stiff. His eyes were rolling back. Foam gathered at the corners of his mouth. No, 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 no. Margaret fell to her knees beside him. Jake, baby, what's wrong? The dog's body convulsed. A low, horrible whine came from his throat. Margaret's hands shook as she touched him. He was burning up, fever hot. Ariel! She screamed. Ariel, help! The being appeared beside her instantly. She hadn't even seen him move. What's happening to him? Margaret sobbed. He was fine, and now he's... Shh! Ariel knelt beside them. "Let me see." He placed one long-fingered hand on Jake's side. The dog's trembling intensified for a moment, then began to slow. Blue light spread from Ariel's palm across Jake's body. Soft at first, then brighter. It covered the dog like water, seeping into his fur, his skin deeper. Margaret watched, terrified and mesmerized. The light pulsed. Once, twice, 3 times. Jake's breathing steadied. The trembling stopped. The stiffness left his legs. Within seconds, he was breathing normally. His eyes focused. His tail gave a weak thump against the floor. Then he stood up, shook himself, and looked at Margaret like nothing had happened. Margaret stared. "What? How did I do that?" Ariel finished her question. "Yes. How?" She looked from Jake to Ariel and back again. He was dying. He was seizing. And now he's fine. Jake walked over and licked her face, tail wagging properly now. "I didn't do it," Ariel said calmly. "What?" "Yes, you did. I saw you. The light. I didn't heal him. I reminded his body what it already knew." Margaret shook her head. "I don't understand." Ariel settled into a sitting position, his luminous form still radiating that gentle warmth. Life wants to continue. That is its natural state. Health, vitality, flow. But sometimes fear or trauma or pain creates a blockage. The body forgets its own blueprint, forgets how to heal itself. He gestured to Jake, who was now lying contentedly at Margaret's feet. "All I did was remind him. I showed his body the pattern of health it was trying to return to. Cleared the blockage. Reminded life that it could continue." "That's not possible," Margaret whispered. That's not how medicine works, isn't it? When a bone breaks, what does the doctor do? He sets it in the right position and lets the body heal itself. When you get a cut, what heals it? Your own cells, following their own instructions. All healing is remembering the pattern, returning to it. Margaret stared at him. "But Jake was dying." "No, Jake's body was confused, afraid. The pattern was interrupted. I simply restored it." She touched Jake's head with shaking hands. He was warm, solid, real, alive. She couldn't find words. Ariel leaned forward. His eyes held hers. "This is what Jesus did, over and over. He didn't perform magic, Margaret. He didn't bend the laws of nature. He understood them. He understood that love, real, focused, intentional love can remind matter of its healthy state, can clear blockages, can restore patterns. That's a miracle," Margaret breathed. "No, that's faith in action. That's love as technology. That's the frequency operating at its purest level." He reached out and took her hand. His skin was warm, almost hot, but gentle. "You can do this too." Margaret jerked back. "What? No, I can't. I'm not." "You are. You already did." "I didn't do anything." "You healed Jake." "Did I? Or did we heal him together?" "You called for help. You wanted him to live. You focused all your love and fear and hope on him. That was energy. That was intention. I simply added to it, amplified it, showed you what was possible." Margaret looked at her hands. They looked the same as always. Normal, human, nothing special. "I don't know how. You will learn. That's what I'm here to teach you. That's why I came." Ariel stood, his blue light filling the room. "The miracle wasn't magic, Margaret. The miracle was love focused into action. Love believing something could change, and change happening." She looked at Jake, at this dog who'd been dying minutes ago and was now happily panting, tail wagging. "You can do this," Ariel repeated. "Jesus tried to show your people. Every healing, every miracle. He was saying, this is possible for you too. You have this power within you. You are made of the same frequency." Margaret felt something crack open inside her, something that had been locked tight for 5 years. "This is what prayer is supposed to be," she whispered. "Yes, not begging a distant God for favors, but activating the frequency, focusing love, choosing creation over destruction, choosing health over disease, choosing life over death." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face again. "Teach me," she said. "Please, teach me how to do this." Ariel smiled. That beautiful, impossible smile. "I will. That's why I'm here. That's what this is all about." Jake barked once, happily, like he agreed, and Margaret felt, for the first time since Tom died, like her life had purpose again. The training began immediately. Ariel made her sit on the floor, cross-legged, back straight. Jake settled beside her, a warm, comforting presence. "Close your eyes," Ariel instructed. Margaret did. "Now breathe, but don't just breathe with your lungs. Breathe with your heart." "I don't know what that means." "You do. You've just forgotten. Put your hand here." She felt his guidance, placed her hand over her chest. "Feel your heartbeat. Focus all your attention there. Not your head, not your thoughts, your heart." Margaret tried. It was harder than it sounded. Her mind kept wandering, worrying, questioning. "Thoughts will come," Ariel said gently. "Let them pass like clouds. Always return to the heart, to the center of your chest, to the warmth there." She breathed, focused, breathed again. Slowly, so slowly, she began to feel it. A warmth spreading from behind her breastbone. Small at first, like an ember. "Good," Ariel encouraged. "Now think of something you're grateful for. Anything. But really feel it. Don't just think the words. Feel the gratitude like it's a real thing." Margaret thought of Jake, of him being alive, of him sitting beside her right now, breathing, warm, safe. The warmth in her chest grew. "Yes, exactly like that. Stay there. Feel gratitude until the air itself seems to glow." She breathed, focused, felt, and something incredible happened. The room did seem to glow. Even with her eyes closed, she could sense it, a brightening, like someone had turned on a light inside her chest and it was spilling out into the world. "Open your eyes," Ariel whispered. She did. The room was different, not dramatically, but subtly. The sunlight seemed warmer. Colors seemed richer. Even the dust motes floating in the air looked beautiful, sacred somehow. "What did I just do?" "You activated the frequency. Just a little, just enough to shift your perception, to see the world through love instead of fear." Margaret looked at her hands. They seemed to be glowing very faintly, or maybe that was just the light. She couldn't tell. "This is real," she breathed. "This is the most real thing there is." They practiced for hours, breathing, focusing on the heart center, generating feelings of gratitude, appreciation, love. Each time, Margaret felt the warmth grow stronger, the sense of connection deepen. "Love is not an emotion," Ariel explained as she practiced. "Emotion is just the surface. Love is a technology, a science, a measurable, repeatable force that affects matter, affects energy, affects reality." Jesus used this? Yes. This is how he healed, how he taught, how he transformed people. He activated this frequency in himself so strongly that others could feel it, could remember it in themselves, could return to their own natural state of wholeness. Margaret opened her eyes, looked at Ariel. "And you're saying I can do this? Really do this?" "You already are doing it, right now. You're changing your own energy, changing the energy of this room. If you do this enough, you'll change your entire life. And eventually, everyone you touch will feel it too." She shook her head in wonder. "This isn't what they taught me in church." "I know. They taught you that you were powerless, that you needed an intermediary, that you were born broken and needed fixing. But that's fear talking. That's institutions maintaining control. So what's the truth? The truth is that you are powerful. You are connected to everything. You are made of the same energy that created galaxies. And when you focus that energy through love, through the frequency Jesus activated, you can create, heal, transform. Not because you're special, because you're human, because that's what humans were designed to do." Margaret felt tears on her face again. But these were different. Not grief, not pain. Joy, pure, simple joy. "Faith isn't hoping things will change," she whispered, understanding finally clicking into place. "Faith is training yourself to be the change." "Yes." Ariel's voice was warm with approval. "Faith is practice, discipline, repetition, like learning an instrument. You don't just believe you can play piano. You practice until you can. Same with this. You practice the frequency until it becomes your natural state." Margaret practiced until the sun set, until her legs were numb from sitting, until the warmth in her chest felt like it would never fade. Each time she focused on gratitude, on love, on connection, she felt lighter, less alone, more purposeful. The grief that had lived in her chest for 5 years began to shift, not disappear but transform, become something else, something that felt almost like strength. Jake stayed beside her the entire time, silent, watchful, like he understood what was happening, like he was guarding something precious. and Margaret realized she was changing from the inside out, cell by cell, breath by breath. She was remembering who she'd been before grief taught her to forget. She was becoming herself again. The third night, the storm returned. Margaret woke to wind howling against the windows, snow battering the glass. The house creaked and groaned like a ship in rough seas. She sat up in bed, heart pounding. Something felt wrong. She threw off the covers and padded into the living room. Ariel was there, but he looked different, dimmer. The blue glow that usually surrounded him had faded to a pale flicker. He was hunched on the couch, body trembling. "Ariel," Margaret rushed to his side. "What's happening?" His voice came weakly into her mind. "The energy. Earth's energy is dense when there is fear. The storm, the cold. It drains me. What can I do? Tell me what to do." "I don't know if—" His voice faded. Margaret felt panic rising. After everything, after all he'd taught her, he couldn't die now. He couldn't. She knelt beside the couch. Her hands hovered over him, shaking. Then she remembered. Love is a force, not a feeling. A force that heals, that creates, that reminds life it can continue. She placed both hands on Ariel's chest. His skin was cold. So cold. Wrong. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Okay, you can do this." She closed her eyes, focused on her heart center, just like he'd taught her. Breathed deep, felt for the warmth that had been growing there over the past 3 days. It was there, small, but there, an ember glowing in her chest. She focused on it, fed it with gratitude, with memory, with love. "Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for helping Jake. Thank you for showing me I'm not alone. Thank you for reminding me what faith really is." The ember grew warmer. She thought of Tom, of the love they'd shared, of how that love hadn't died, it had transformed, become her strength, her compassion, her ability to help a stranger from the stars. The warmth spread through her chest, down her arms, into her hands. "Love is a living force," she whispered, repeating Ariel's words. "Love is creation. Love is the frequency that connects everything." She felt energy moving through her, not from her through her, like she was a channel for something much bigger, something ancient and powerful and good. Her hands grew hot against Ariel's chest. The room began to brighten, not from the lamp, from her, from the space between her palms and his body. Blue light, the same blue that radiated from Ariel, began to pulse between them. "Love reminds life that it can continue," Margaret said, stronger now. "I'm reminding you. You can continue. You will continue." The light grew brighter, warmer. Ariel's body stopped trembling. Color, that strange silvery luminescence, began to return to his skin. The wounds that had been glowing dimly flared briefly, then faded to almost nothing. His eyes opened, and Margaret heard his voice, clear and strong in her mind. "Now you understand." She gasped, pulled her hands back. They were still glowing faintly, pulsing with residual energy. Did I? "You did." Ariel sat up, fully restored, the blue light surrounding him bright and steady again. "You activated the frequency, focused it through love, through intention, through choice. You became a channel for creation itself." Margaret looked at her hands. They looked normal now, just hands, but she knew what they'd done, what she'd done. "This is what prayer is supposed to be," she whispered. "Yes, not words spoken into emptiness, not begging, not hoping, but energy focused with intention. Love acting as force. Creation choosing to create more creation." She laughed, a shaky, overwhelmed laugh. I healed you." "No, you reminded me. You cleared the blockage. You added your energy to mine until the pattern restored itself. You participated in creation." Tears streamed down Margaret's face, but she was smiling, actually smiling. "For 5 years," she said, voice breaking, "I thought prayer didn't work. I thought God wasn't listening. I thought I was alone. And now I know. Prayer does work, but not the way they taught me. It's not about asking. It's about doing. It's about becoming the answer. It's about—" She struggled for words. "It's about being love, not feeling it. Being it." Ariel reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. His touch was warm, solid, real. "You participated in something sacred tonight, Margaret Lewis. You proved to yourself that you are not powerless, that love is not passive, that faith is active, that you are connected to everything." She covered her face with her hands and cried, But these tears were different, clean, healing. For the first time since Tom died, she felt like her prayers had been answered. Not because God had reached down from heaven and fixed things, but because she had reached up, reached in, and become the thing she'd been asking for. She had become the presence, the answer, the love she'd been seeking. Jake patted over and pressed against her leg. Warm, alive, proof that impossible things could happen, that healing was real, that faith worked. Not faith as belief, faith as practice, as action, as love made tangible. Margaret sat there on the floor, crying and laughing, feeling more connected to God, to life, to love, to everything than she had in her entire life. The storm raged outside, but inside, everything was warm, bright, sacred. Inside, she had finally found what she'd been looking for. Morning came too soon. Margaret woke to pale sunlight filtering through the curtains. For a moment, she lay there, warm under the blankets, feeling more rested than she had in years. Then she remembered, sat up quickly. Ariel was standing by the window, silhouette backlit by morning light. He was facing outside, looking at something she couldn't see. The blue glow around him was different now, brighter, more concentrated, like he was gathering himself. She knew immediately what was happening. "You're leaving." It wasn't a question. Ariel turned to face her. His expression was gentle, sad, maybe. Hard to tell with those luminous features. "Yes." Margaret threw off the covers and crossed the room quickly. "When?" "Now. Soon. My form needs to return to its origin. I've stayed as long as I can. But..." She stopped, swallowed hard. "I have so many questions still. So much I don't understand. There's so much you haven't taught me yet." Ariel smiled. That beautiful, impossible smile that made the whole room seem warmer. "The answers are already inside you, Margaret. Everything I've taught you, you already knew. You just forgot. I only reminded you. That's not true. I didn't know any of this. I didn't know about the frequency or love as technology or... You did. Your heart knew. When you brought me into your home that first night, you didn't act from knowledge. You acted from love, from the deepest truth inside you. That's knowing. That's the only knowing that matters." Margaret felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. "What if I forget again? What if I can't do it without you here?" "You won't forget. Not anymore. You've remembered too deeply now. It's in your cells, in your breath, in every choice you'll make from this moment forward." The blue light around him began to intensify, growing brighter, more encompassing. She could feel the energy shifting in the room, like reality was preparing to let him go. "Please," she whispered, "stay just a little longer. A few more days, a week. I can't. This form was never meant to stay. I came to deliver a message, to remind one person, and through that one person, touch others. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked." "Why me?" The question burst out of her. "Why did you choose me? I'm nobody. I'm just a sad, lonely woman who spent 5 years being angry at God." Ariel stepped closer, placed both hands on her shoulders. His touch was warm, grounding. "That's exactly why. Because you were ready. Because your heart was cracked open. Because you'd stopped pretending to have answers and were finally ready to receive truth. Broken open is the only way light gets in." The blue light was wrapping around him completely now, starting at his feet and spiraling upward, like he was dissolving into pure energy. "Remember this," he said, voice strong and clear in her mind. "Love is the language that unites worlds. Not English, not religion, not politics or race or nationality. Love, the frequency of creation itself. That's what connects all beings everywhere, across all time and space." Margaret nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I'll remember. And remember this too. God was never far away, never silent, never gone, only misinterpreted, misunderstood, buried under fear and rules and institutions, but always present, always speaking, always loving. You just had to remember how to listen." The light reached his chest now, his face. He was becoming more light than form, more energy than matter. "You're not alone, Margaret Lewis. You never were. You're connected to everything, everyone. Every act of love you perform ripples out across the entire web of existence. You matter. Your choices matter. Your love matters. I don't want you to go," she sobbed. "I'm not going. I'm just changing form, like your husband did, like all love does. It transforms. It becomes other things, other experiences, but it never ends. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. Jake, who'd been sleeping in the corner, suddenly stood, walked over to Ariel, looked up at him with those soulful brown eyes. He barked once, clear, final, like he understood this was goodbye. Ariel reached down and placed a hand on Jake's head. The dog's tail wagged slowly. Then he sat, content. "Take care of her," Ariel said, whether to Jake or to Margaret, she couldn't tell. The light covered him completely now. He was barely visible inside it, just a silhouette, a shape made of blue fire. "Heaven begins with you." His voice came, fading now, distant, not after death, not in some far-off place, but here, now, in every simple gesture of kindness, in every choice to love instead of fear, in every moment you remember who you really are. Ariel, go out into the world, Margaret. Share what you've learned, not by preaching, not by convincing, but by being, by living it, by letting love move through you like a force of nature. That's how the frequency spreads, one heart at a time, one choice at a time, one act of compassion at a time. The light flared brighter than the sun. Margaret had to shield her eyes, and when she lowered her hand, he was gone, just gone. The room felt empty, hollow, like something essential had been removed and the space hadn't figured out how to adjust yet. But it wasn't cold. The air was warm, almost hot, like Ariel's presence had left heat behind, had changed the very molecules of the room. Margaret stood there, hand still raised, tears streaming down her face. She was crying, but she was also smiling, because she understood now, really understood. He hadn't left. He'd just changed form, become something else, returned to wherever beings like him went when they weren't walking around in bodies that glowed. But the message remained, the lesson remained, the frequency remained, inside her, in her chest, in her heart, in every cell of her body. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. God wasn't silent. God was speaking through everything, through the warmth in this room, through Jake's steady breathing, through the sunlight on the snow outside, through the beat of her own heart. She just had to remember to listen. Margaret wiped her face, took a deep, shaky breath. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room. "Thank you for everything." The air seemed to hum in response, gentle, loving, alive. And Margaret knew, with absolute certainty, that he had heard her, that he was still there, just in a different way, that love never really leaves, it only transforms. Margaret tried to tell people. Of course she did. How could she not? How could she keep something like this to herself? 3 days after Ariel left, she went into town, stopped by the general store where she knew the neighbors gathered. Mrs. Henderson was there, and Bill from the hardware store, and the Johnsons who lived down the road. "You'll never believe what happened to me," Margaret began. They listened, at first with curiosity, then with concern, finally with barely concealed amusement. When she finished, told them about the blue light, the angel, the teachings about love as frequency, Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. "Oh, honey," she said, voice dripping with pity. "You've been alone too long. It was probably just a dream, a very vivid dream." "It wasn't a dream, it was real. I talked to him for days. He healed Jake. He taught me things about Jesus being an alien," Bill interrupted, chuckling. "Margaret, come on. You know how that sounds." "I know how it sounds, but it happened. I'm telling you, it happened." The Johnsons exchanged glances, the kind of look people share when they think someone is losing it. "Grief can do strange things," Mrs. Johnson said carefully. "Make us see things that aren't there, especially when we're lonely." Margaret felt frustration rising. "I'm not crazy, and I wasn't dreaming. Check the barn. There are burn marks, circles in the hay where he fell. Physical evidence, but she could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe her. Worse, they felt sorry for her. The pity was harder to take than the disbelief. That Sunday, Pastor Williams showed up at her door. Someone had clearly called him, expressed concern about poor Margaret Lewis losing her grip on reality. He sat in her living room, the same room where Ariel had stayed, and spoke in that gentle, condescending tone religious leaders use when they think you've strayed from the path. "Margaret, I understand you've been through a difficult time. Losing Tom was a tragedy, but inventing elaborate fantasies about angels and aliens, that's not the answer. You need to come back to church, return to reason. Ground yourself in scripture and community. I found reason, Margaret said calmly. I found it in love, real love, active love, not rules or doctrine or tradition. Love as an actual force, as creation itself. Pastor Williams frowned. That sounds like New Age nonsense, dangerous nonsense. The Bible is very clear about. Is it? Or did we make it clear by interpreting it through fear instead of love? By building institutions instead of relationships? By making God distant and angry instead of present and loving? The pastor's face reddened. I think you need to pray. Ask God for discernment. This philosophy you're spouting is not Christianity. Maybe not, Margaret agreed. Maybe it's something truer, something that existed before Christianity, before any religion. Maybe it's just reality, the way things actually work when you strip away all the layers of fear. He left shortly after that, shaking his head. She heard him mutter something about the devil as he walked to his car. Margaret almost laughed. Almost. But she also felt sadness. Sadness that someone dedicated to God couldn't recognize truth when it was offered. Couldn't see that love is bigger than any single religion. That the frequency Ariel spoke about transcended churches and temples and holy books. She took people to the barn, showed them the evidence, the circular burn patterns in the dirt floor, the singed hay, the way the metal tools had been warped by heat that shouldn't have existed. Lightning, they said. Or maybe you had a small electrical fire and don't remember. Trauma can mess with memory. No one believed. No one wanted to believe. It was easier to think she was crazy or lonely or grief-stricken than to consider that their entire understanding of reality might be incomplete. But strangely, Margaret found she didn't mind. She didn't need their approval anymore. Didn't need validation. Didn't need anyone to confirm her experience. She knew what had happened. She knew what she'd learned. She knew what she'd felt when she healed Ariel, when she activated the frequency. That knowledge was enough. She went home and pulled out an old notebook, one of the blank journals she'd bought years ago with the intention of keeping a diary but never used. She opened it to the first page and wrote, "Lessons from Ariel." Then she started writing. Everything he'd taught her, every conversation, every revelation, but not as philosophical theory, as practical instruction. How to breathe from the heart center. How to generate gratitude until it becomes tangible energy. How to see every act of compassion as creation itself. How to understand prayer as active participation, not passive begging. How to recognize God not as distant authority but as present frequency flowing through everything. She wrote for hours, days, filling page after page with simple, clear teachings, not complicated, not mystical, just practical steps anyone could follow. Each phrase was a prayer. Each instruction was a way to serve, to connect, to love. The doubt of others didn't shake her. If anything, it strengthened her conviction, because she'd experienced it, lived it, felt it, working in her own body. That was worth more than 1,000 people believing her story. One person living the truth was more powerful than 1,000,000 people arguing about it. She kept writing. Margaret didn't try to convince anyone anymore. Instead, she just started living differently. The next week, she heard that old Mr. Patterson down the road had taken a fall, broke his hip, was laid up in bed with no family nearby to help. She made soup, loaded it into a thermos, put it in a basket with some bread and books, and walked down the road to his house. Mr. Patterson was surprised to see her. They'd been neighbors for years but barely spoke. He was grumpy, set in his ways, the kind of man who complained about everything. "What do you want?" he grumbled when she knocked. "Brought you soup. Heard you were hurt. Don't need charity." "It's not charity, it's neighborliness. Going to let me in, or are you going to make an injured man get up to close the door on me?" He let her in. She didn't preach, didn't tell him about Ariel, didn't try to explain the frequency or love as technology. She just helped, brought him food, read to him, changed his bandages when the visiting nurse couldn't come, sat with him so he wouldn't be alone. And while she did it, she practiced what Ariel taught, breathed from her heart, generated gratitude, focused love like a beam of light at this cantankerous old man who'd never shown kindness to anyone. "Every act of love heals the planet," she whispered to herself as she washed his dishes. "This matters. This creates. This changes things." 2 weeks later, Mr. Patterson was up and walking, healed faster than the doctors expected. They called it remarkable. Lucky. Margaret knew better. She visited Mrs. Chen next, the elderly woman who lived alone with too many cats and early-stage dementia, brought her groceries, helped organize her medications, sat and listened to the same stories repeated over and over with patience and genuine interest. Love as practice, as discipline, as choice. Then the Morrison family, struggling after the father lost his job. She brought casseroles, offered to tutor their kids, connected them with resources. Never mentioning Ariel, never preaching, just doing. But people started noticing something. Mr. Patterson, who'd been a bitter recluse for years, started smiling, started talking to neighbors, even helped someone change a tire one day, something unthinkable before. Mrs. Chen's dementia seemed to slow. She had more good days, more clarity. Her family was amazed. The Morrison kids started doing better in school. The father found work. The whole family's energy shifted. "What are you doing to these people?" Pastor Williams demanded when he heard. "What kind of manipulation is this?" Margaret looked at him calmly. "I'm loving them. That's all. No manipulation, no tricks, just showing up, helping, being present. But they're changing, dramatically. Yes, because compassion is a real force, not symbolic, not metaphorical, real, physical. It changes people, changes circumstances, changes outcomes." One day Margaret was visiting Mr. Patterson when he suddenly grabbed her hand. "I don't know what you did," he said, voice rough with emotion, "but I feel different, like I've been asleep my whole life and just woke up, like I forgot what it means to be human and you reminded me." Margaret squeezed his hand. "You did that yourself. I just showed up." "No, it's more than that. When you're around, things feel possible, like the world isn't as broken as I thought, like maybe there's still good in it." That's the frequency, Margaret thought. That's love operating as force. She didn't say it out loud, just smiled. Her face had changed. People commented on it. The lines of grief and anger that had marked her for 5 years were fading, being replaced by something else. Serenity, peace, light, almost. She didn't fear loneliness anymore, because she felt God felt the frequency, the connection, the love in every interaction, every moment, every breath. When she helped someone, she wasn't alone. She was participating in creation itself, part of something vast and beautiful and eternal. Jake accompanied her on every visit, silent, faithful, a gentle presence that somehow made people feel safe, feel seen. Margaret's life had purpose now, not grand or dramatic purpose, simple purpose. Show up, help, love, repeat. And in that simplicity, she found more peace than she'd ever known, more joy than she'd thought possible, more connection to God than all her years of church attendance had ever provided. This was what Ariel meant. This was the teaching. This was faith as practice. Love not as feeling, but as action, as choice, as technology that literally changes reality. And it worked. It really, truly worked. 6 months after Ariel left, Margaret stood in her backyard on a clear night. The stars were brilliant, countless, beautiful. She looked up at them and felt such gratitude for everything, for the pain that broke her open, for the angel who reminded her, for the chance to live differently, to love differently. "Ariel," she called softly into the darkness. She didn't really expect an answer. He was gone, back to wherever he came from. She'd accepted that. But then, a flash of blue light on the horizon, brief, distant, like a star blinking. Margaret's breath caught, and his voice came, faint but clear, inside her mind, one last time. "You understand now." Tears sprang to her eyes. "I do. I really do. Humanity is not a race, not a species defined by biology. It's a frequency, a way of being, a choice to love instead of fear, to create instead of destroy, to connect instead of separate." Margaret nodded, even though she was alone, even though no one could see her. "To love is to serve," the voice continued, "not to wait for understanding, not to demand recognition, not to expect reward, just to serve, to give, to help, because that's what love does. That's what the frequency is. Yes, and heaven, true heaven, doesn't begin after death. It begins in each simple gesture of kindness, each time you choose compassion over judgment, each time you help someone who can't repay you, each time you see another person as yourself. That's heaven. That's the kingdom. That's what Jesus tried to show you. Margaret smiled through her tears. I'm trying. Every day, I'm trying to live it. I know, I see. We all see. Every act of love ripples across dimensions, touches worlds you can't imagine. You are not small, Margaret Lewis. You are infinite. You are powerful. You are exactly what the world needs. The blue light pulsed once more, brighter this time. Thank you, Margaret whispered. Thank you for everything, for reminding me, for teaching me, for helping me remember who I am. You were always this. I just cleared away the debris so you could see it. The light began to fade. Will I see you again? Margaret asked quickly. You see me every time you look at someone with love, every time you serve, every time you choose creation. I never left. I just changed form, like all love does. And then he was gone, really gone this time. But Margaret didn't feel sad, didn't feel abandoned, because she understood now, truly understood. The angel never left. He was in her heart, in her actions, in every choice she made, in every person she helped. Love never leaves. It just transforms, takes new shapes, new expressions, new forms. Tom hadn't left her. He'd become her strength. Ariel hadn't left her. He'd become her practice. God had never left anyone, just been misunderstood, misinterpreted, reduced to rules instead of recognized as presence. Margaret looked at the stars, then down at her hands, ordinary hands, human hands, hands that could heal, could help, could serve, hands that channeled the frequency. Jake pressed against her leg. She reached down and scratched his ears. Come on, boy, she said softly. Let's go inside. They walked back to the house together, the warm light from the windows spilling onto the snow. And Margaret thought, this is enough. This simple life, this quiet practice, this daily choice to love, this is everything. Faith isn't belief in something you can't see. Faith is love put into practice. Every single day, in every small moment, every simple gesture, every quiet choice. That's the secret. That's the truth. That's what Jesus taught and what Ariel reminded her of. Love is the frequency that connects everything, and we can all tune in, all participate, all become channels for creation itself, not through grand gestures, not through miracles or prophecy or religious authority, but through showing up, through helping, through choosing compassion, through living as if every person matters, because they do, through acting as if love is real power, because it is, through remembering that God isn't distant, never was, never will be, just misunderstood, just waiting for us to remember, to wake up, to tune in, to love. Margaret closed the door behind her. Jake settled by the fire, and she opened her notebook, Lessons from Ariel, and wrote one final entry. Faith is love in action, every day, every moment, every choice. That's the whole teaching. That's everything. Start there, stay there, and watch the world transform. She closed the book, smiled, and lived the